This video analyzes and explains the guitar and bass parts that are present during the verses of the song. The verses appear at 3 intervals in the song. The first time is at 36 seconds on your timer. The second will be at 1 minute and 11 seconds. The third and final appearance is right after the guitar solo at 2 minutes and 29 seconds. The tuning used in this video and on the record is standard E and 440 wavelength calibration. The verses are going to be 12 measures long. We're going to start out by playing an E5 power chord. The E5 is where the first finger is the root note on the A string at the 7th fret. The verses actually start out on the final 8th note of the main rhythm. We're going to pick this power chord up on that final beat to reflect that it's an upbeat. We're going to let the chord sustain out into the first measure of the verses, where we're going to pick it again right after 1. So you're going to have 2 upstrokes in a row just like this. Okay. From there on out, in the first 2 measures, we're going to pick the open E string down on the downbeats, and we're going to pick that chord up on the upbeats. On the final upbeat of the second measure, we're going to go to the G note located on the E string at the 3rd fret. We'll pick that upwards and give it a bend after we pick it, about a quarter step up in pitch. To eliminate any confusion, I'll just play those 2 measures, and remember, I'm going to start playing on the upbeat after 4 after the lead in. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. Okay. From here, to start the 3rd measure, we're going to play the E5 power chord. We're going to play it on the upbeat after 1 with all downstrokes and palm muting. Like this. And 2, and 3, and 4. Okay, notes to count. And 2, and 3, and 4. On the end beat after 4, we're going to go back to that G note, pick it and bend it. Just like we did in the previous measure. So with the 4 count lead in, let's tie those 3 measures together. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. Now we're going to go back to the E5 power chord and do exactly what we did in the previous measure. The only difference is, instead of ending it on the G note, we're going to go back to that E5 power chord. With a 4 count lead in, let's do those first 4 measures. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. If you were watching closely at the end of the last segment, when I finished playing up the first 4 measures, you'll notice that when I shifted up to the E5 power chord, I picked it upwards. It's the last 8th note of the 4 measure sequence. At this point, we're going to start the 5th through 8th measures, and we're going to repeat what we did the first 4 measures exactly the same way. The difference is, at the end of the 4th measure, which is now the 8th measure, we're not going to go back to this E5 power chord. Instead, we're going to go to the G5 power chord and pick it downwards and let it ring out into the 9th measure. With a 4 count lead in, let's just do measures 5 through 8 one time, just so you can see how they plug in together. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. Okay, now let's do the first 8 measures in sequence, just so you can see how they plug together. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, 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 and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. Once we reach the 9th measure, the G5 power chord should already be ringing out because we played it on the last 8th note of the previous measure. We're going to let this ring out for the entire 9th measure and 3/4 of the way into the 10th measure. On the 4 beat of the 10th measure, we're going to pick this chord again down on 4, and on the upbeat right after 4, we're going to shift down a half a step in pitch to the F sharp 5 power chord and pick that up. And we'll let that ring out into the 11th measure, pretty much all the way up until the final 8th note. Just to eliminate any confusion, let's do that much so far. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and. Okay, notice that I went to the B5 power chord on the final 8th note of the 11th measure. Okay, the B5 is where the first finger is the root note on the A string at the 2nd fret. We're going to let that ring out into the 12th and final measure all the way up until 3. And once we get to the upbeat after 3, we're going to play an octave. The first finger will be on the A string at the 5th fret, and the third finger will be on the G string at the 7th fret. I'm going to lay that first finger kind of flat to deaden out the string in between so it doesn't sound. We're going to pick this down on the upbeat after 3 and slide up in pitch to finish up the 12th measure. Just like that. With a 4 count lead in, let's do measures 9 through 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, and. Now that you know all 12 measures, we're going to play them all in sequence right from the beginning. One thing that we'll do differently though is we're going to start out playing the last 2 measures of the main rhythm just to make sure that you understand how the verses plug into that. We're going to start out on the B5 power chord, and I'm going to give you a 3 count lead in. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, and 2, and 2, and 2, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, 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 and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, and 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, and. The bass guitar and the rhythm guitar are going to lock in tightly together to drive the song during the verses. The main difference is that the guitar is going to use syncopation. It's going to play the open E string by picking down on the downbeats, and it's going to accent on the and beats by picking up on a higher pitched E5 power chord. The bass is just going to stay on the low open E string. Anytime this G note is bent, where the first finger is on the E string to the 3rd fret, the bass is going to accent with it and pause. The bass will continue driving by picking the next upbeat in the next measure right after 1. What you're going to see here, anytime there's a pause on bass, is 2 upstrokes in a row before the alternate picking resumes. Just like the guitar, the bass is going to enter on the last upbeat of the main rhythm. So with a 4 count lead in, I'm going to play the first 8 measures, and you should be able to follow it. Just look closely for the pauses in the places where you have 2 upstrokes in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, 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 and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. As we start the 9th measure, this G note should already be ringing out because we played it on the final 8th note of the 8th measure. In the 9th measure, we're going to continue driving this, starting with an upward picking motion on the first and beat right after 1. And we're going to resume the alternate picking of steady 8th notes all the way through the 10th measure until its final note, where we're going to play the F sharp, which is on the E string at the 2nd fret, where the first finger is. And of course, when we play that upstroke, we're going to let that sustain out into the 11th measure. The primary difference here between the bass and the guitar is that the guitar is going to accent on the changes by playing root 5 power chords and then letting them sustain out. The bass is going to drive the root notes of those chords. With the 4-count lead-in, here's what measures 9 and 10 are going to sound like. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now we're in the 11th measure. We're going to continue driving this F sharp note, starting with the first and beat right after 1. That's an upward picking motion. We're going to drive that through the entire 11th measure until we get to its final 8th note, where we're going to shift to the B note, where the first finger is on the A string at the 2nd fret. Once again, that's an upward picking motion, and we'll let that ring out into the 12th measure. With the 4-count lead-in, here's what measures 9 through 11 will sound like. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, now we're going to finish up. The 12th measure, we're going to play 4 more 8th notes on that B, starting with an upward picking motion. And 2 and 3, just like this. Okay? On the and beat right after 3, the pinky is going to go to the D note located on the A string at the 5th fret. We're going to play 2 8th notes, okay? And 4 picked up, down. And then we're going to go to the open E string with an upward picking motion to finish up the 12th measure on that final 8th note. With the 4-count lead-in, here's what measures 8 through 12 are going to sound like. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. With the 4-count lead-in, let's do all 12 measures of the verse right from the start. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 2 and